Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the concern that some Tory MPs have, especially in vulnerable seats it appears, over the seemingly out of control cost of living rises that their policies have inflicted upon us. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So the cost of energy, fuel and food increased sharply in 2021. But it's set to do so again in 2022. Numerous reasons, some of them Brexit, some of them just made worse by Brexit, but all the results of Conservative government policy. We should have learned from 2020 that Conservative economic policy simply doesn't work, and it is most badly exposed during a serious national emergency. The pandemic resulted in the government being forced into what can only be described as socialist economic policies in order to keep our head above water. And even then, they crushed our economy because they refused to adopt others like adequate sick pay to isolate. That there is anybody left in the country who can think that an economic policy that involves placing a disproportionate tax burden onto the working poor and scales back spending on public services is incredible. But there it is. But yet again, we are suffering from the impacts of the free market capitalist and Brexit mindset. As a result of trade barriers, the cost of food has increased sharply and is going to continue to do so. The pressures on energy prices are not, of course, directly linked to Brexit, but government policy is what is causing them to rocket out of control. For example, the EU held an emergency meeting last October to discuss the rising price of energy and come up with a series of measures for each individual member state to help them protect themselves from the worst short and medium term impacts. We could have done the same thing. Our government could have done the same thing. Why didn't it? Our government simply didn't consider high cost of living an issue worth their time. In fact, so inert has the government been on the issue, despite the fact that another massive hike of about 50% is coming this April, that some Conservative MPs, worried about their seats at the next election, have written to the government to ask for some intervention. Of course, being Conservative MPs, all they can think of to ask is for a reduction in VAT and the environmental levies. In other words, helping to protect the profits of the energy companies as opposed to any measures that will actually deal with the issue long term. I mean, even if dropping these taxes were savings entirely passed on to the consumer, and dropping the environmental levies will not be, then it would still leave us with a very high cost of energy. The MPs noted in their letter to the Prime Minister that the rising energy prices would pose more of a problem for people in the UK than other comparable countries. What's that? It's not just down to global pressures? How interesting. So where are we in terms of international comparisons? Well, right now, if you compare our cost of energy, it's already higher than most of our immediate neighbours. I worked out the cost of energy in dollars per megawatt hour divided by the median income in thousands of international dollars. And what you see is that the UK pay 18.93. This is a factor. Don't worry about the units. It all gets very messy. But our figure is 18.93. Ireland is a little less, 18.87. France is way less on 12.83. But they do have nationalised energy. The Netherlands on 10.9, benefiting from their extensive energy network and low reliance on fossil fuels. Sweden is also on 10.72. Of our immediate neighbours, Ireland's a little similar, Belgium's a little similar, that's on 18.63. But our immediate neighbours, though concerned, are not looking at their energy prices doubling. And as I say, in the UK, it isn't just that we are looking at energy price rises outstripping anything our neighbours are having to deal with, but we also, on top of it, have soaring food prices to go alongside it. Coupled with the already oppressive distribution of wealth in the UK and the rising tax burden, and the government are about to introduce yet more millions to the concept of poverty. And I don't just mean having to tighten your belts. I mean having to choose between what they'd previously considered essentials. You know, people may complain if they have to cut back on a few luxuries, but when people have to choose between food and the gas or the electricity, you know, the reason the government initiated the furlough scheme and universal credit uplift in 2020 wasn't because they had any regard for the people who would suffer during the pandemic, but because they understand they cannot afford a critical mass of the voting middle classes to see the brutality in the system when they need it. The Conservatives rely upon a divided population. They rely upon working people on reasonable incomes, thinking that those in need of benefits are all scroungers, that they don't work hard enough, if at all. This concept is challenged when those workers who consider themselves to work very hard, thank you very much, find themselves unable to afford what they consider a minimum quality of life on their income. As a result of political decisions taken by the government, millions of full-time working people are a few months away from a higher tax bill, much higher energy bills, higher grocery costs, alongside the historic inflation of 2021, and without the income rise to match. Right now, it does not seem that the Conservatives have a serious plan to deal with the issue. Even the MPs showing the greatest alarm that have written this letter can only think in terms of lowering taxes on energy. But there are problems with this. The first, as I say, is that it will make a dent only in the soaring rise in the cost of living. It won't actually prevent a load of people from being tipped from just about managing to not managing at all. In fact, anti-Brexit campaigners have lost no time in reminding us that various pro-Brexit outlets like the Daily Express and Jacob Rees-Mogg said that Brexit would mean lower food prices and lower cost of energy. Oh yes, really? So the rising cost of living doesn't just shatter the illusion that the Conservatives are somehow good with the economy, but it blows a hole in their Brexit project as well. And speaking of blowing holes in things, the second issue is that it will make another hole in Sunak's books. While Johnson remains in charge, there is this tussle going on between the Prime Minister, who wants the Grand Levelling Up project funding, and the Chancellor. He's not that bothered about actually levelling up, Johnson. Has to be said. But he does want to boast about the money he's spent on it. But on the other hand, you have the Chancellor who is wanting to reduce public expenditure more in line with the usual Conservative thinking. Sunak was already not impressed having to budget for the biggest tax burden in generations and the largest tax rise since, well, the last time the Conservatives were in power and had buggered the economy up in the early 90s. Being told to scrap VAT and other levies on energy is not likely to be helpful to him. Because when he does cut taxes, he wants it to be felt by people who will think that he's awesome for reducing their cost of living. But what happens if he reduces levies on energy? The cost of energy will still rise, and a lot as well. The expected rise is 50% this April. If they remove these levies, I think it was noted that it might bring the cost down by 23%. So that doesn't even come close to countering the rise that's coming. But it will also leave him with a budget hole that will have to be filled either with reduced spending, which Johnson doesn't like, or increased taxes elsewhere, which will do his reputation no good in the party where, he's gunning for Johnson's job. What we're seeing here is the Conservatives trapped by their own economic philosophy and trying to dig themselves out. But just as with Homer Simpson, they're just digging downwards. If they do actually act, and in a way that prevents the damage coming to household budgets around the country, then it can only be by ignoring their own economic theories, just as they did with furlough. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.